The September wind howled through the towering buildings of San Francisco, carrying the crisp bite of autumn. Evelyn Carter, a brilliant artificial intelligence scientist, clutched her research documents tightly as she stepped out of the taxi in front of the Valencia Grand Hotel. She had come to attend the year's biggest biomedical technology conference, where she was set to present her groundbreaking work on AI-driven regenerative medicine. But the moment she reached the front desk, she knew something was wrong. "I'm sorry, but according to our system, you've already checked in an hour ago." Evelyn frowned. "That's impossible. I just arrived from Seattle." The receptionist double-checked, confirming that her room had been mistakenly assigned to someone else. A security guard was called to accompany her upstairs to investigate. When the door swung open, the sight inside made Evelyn freeze. A tall man with tousled dark hair stood by the window, his dress shirt unbuttoned at the collar. On the desk, a laptop hummed softly amid stacks of financial reports. "What's going on?" His voice was deep and commanding. "It seems this room has been mistakenly assigned to both of you," the security guard explained. The man turned, his sharp gaze sweeping over Evelyn before softening slightly. "Evelyn Carter?" She stiffened. "You know me?" "Of course. I'm Theo Sterling." Evelyn's pulse skipped a beat. Theo Sterling, CEO of Sterling Dynamics, a powerhouse in AI and big data analytics. A man known not just for his wealth, but for his ruthless acquisitions in the tech world. "I've read your research. It's quite impressive." A faint smirk tugged at the corner of his lips. "Looks like the hotel just gave us an early reason to meet." Evelyn wasn't sure whether this was fortune or trouble, but one thing was certain: this would be no ordinary encounter. Evelyn couldn't deny that meeting Theo Sterling had caught her off guard, but what unsettled her more was the unexpected invitation that followed. "I want to hear more about your research." Theo's voice was smooth over the phone. "Dinner at Skyview? 8 p.m.? Evelyn checked the time. She had exactly 1 hour to prepare. She wasn't sure what made her accept. Maybe curiosity, or maybe it was the way Theo's gaze, cold yet mesmerizing, seemed to challenge her. Whatever the reason, an hour later, she stepped into Skyview, a rooftop restaurant where city lights glittered like diamonds against the night sky. Theo was already there, exuding effortless confidence. As she approached, he stood and pulled out her chair, a gesture so unexpectedly chivalrous that it left her momentarily speechless. "So," he poured wine into her glass, his eyes never leaving hers. "What made you pursue AI in regenerative medicine?" Evelyn slowly relaxed as she spoke about her passion. Artificial intelligence isn't just about algorithms. If we can teach it to understand cellular regeneration, we can heal injuries that were once considered irreversible. Theo listened intently, occasionally posing questions that forced her to think in ways she hadn't before. She was surprised by how easy it felt to talk to him, how natural. But it wasn't just the conversation. Something between them had shifted. As dinner wound down, neither of them made a move to leave. When Theo handed her the wine list, his fingers brushed against her wrist. Just a fleeting touch, but it sent a pulse of electricity through her. "Do you feel it?" His voice was low. Evelyn swallowed. "Feel what?" That this wasn't just a coincidence. His gaze darkened, deep and unreadable. A shiver ran down Evelyn's spine, not from fear, but from something else entirely. They left the restaurant together. As the elevator carried them to the top floor of the hotel, the charged silence between them was almost unbearable. The moment the doors slid open, Evelyn barely had time to take a breath before Theo pulled her into a kiss, urgent, demanding, as if he'd been waiting all night for this. She didn't resist. She didn't want to. By the time they reached his suite, all reason had dissolved. Clothes were discarded, hands and lips traced desperate paths across heated skin. Every touch, every whispered breath was a symphony of need and surrender. That night, they gave in to the pull between them, completely, unreservedly. Evelyn didn't know if this was the beginning of something or just a reckless detour, but one thing was certain: this was a night she would never forget. The next morning, Evelyn woke up tangled in Theo's sheets, the golden light of dawn spilling through the windows. For a moment, Everything felt surreal. She watched Theo, still asleep, his breathing steady. Part of her wanted to stay, to see where this could lead, but reality pressed in. She had a flight to catch, a career waiting for her in Seattle. Slipping out of bed, she dressed quietly, leaving behind only the lingering scent of her perfume and the memory of a night that had shaken her to the core. Evelyn left San Francisco with her mind in turmoil. She had tried to focus on her research, but the memory of that night with Theo lingered in ways she couldn't quite explain. Back in Seattle, she buried herself in work, spending long hours in the lab, running AI models and refining her algorithms. But a few weeks later, something felt off. She was more exhausted than usual. Waves of nausea hit her unexpectedly, and the scent of coffee, her daily lifeline, now made her stomach turn. She had suspicions, but it wasn't until Rachel, her best friend, commented, "You look pale, Evelyn. Are you sure you're not sick?" that she truly began to worry. One early morning, with trembling hands, she held a pregnancy test and waited. When the two pink lines appeared unmistakably clear, the world tilted on its axis. She was pregnant. She had braced herself for this possibility, yet when it became real, she was still utterly overwhelmed. And when she went in for a checkup, the news became even more shocking. She was carrying twins. Sitting in her car after the appointment, she stared at the ultrasound images. Two tiny lives growing inside her, the result of one night, one moment she never imagined would change everything. But what about Theo? She hadn't spoken to him since leaving San Francisco. She had no idea if he would want to know. He was one of the most powerful CEOs in the tech industry, constantly traveling between meetings and billion-dollar acquisitions. Did he even want to be a father? She hesitated for a week, but then, as she skimmed through the latest news, she saw an article about a scandal involving Theo's company. That was when she realized she couldn't keep this from him any longer. She dialed his number, her pulse pounding as the line rang. "Evelyn?" His voice was deep, slightly surprised as he answered. She took a steadying breath. "We need to talk, and you might want to sit down for this." There was a brief silence before he responded. "I'm in Michigan, but I'll be on the next flight to Seattle." She didn't know what made him decide so quickly, but less than 24 hours later, Theo Sterling was at her doorstep, his piercing gaze full of unspoken questions. Evelyn opened the door, her heart pounding as she took in the sight of Theo standing there. He looked as impeccable as always, dark suit crisp, presence commanding, but his eyes held a tension she had never seen before. "Can I come in?" His voice was low, unwavering. She nodded, stepping aside as he entered. The small space of her apartment suddenly felt suffocating with his presence. "Do you want something to drink?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "No," he met her gaze. "Just tell me." Evelyn inhaled deeply before handing him the ultrasound images. Theo took them, his sharp eyes scanning the prints. For a brief moment, something softened in his expression. "Twins," he said, as if confirming it for himself. She nodded. "I wanted to tell you sooner, but I wasn't sure how you'd react." Theo was silent for a long time, staring at the images. Then he looked up, his voice steady but no longer cold. "Evelyn, I'm not the kind of man who walks away from responsibility. These children, they're ours, and I will do whatever it takes to make sure they have everything they need." She searched his face. "What does that mean?" "It means I want them to have a family, a real family. I want to marry you." Evelyn let out a short, dry laugh. "Are you asking because you want to, or because you feel like you have to?" Theo held her gaze. "Both. But most of all, I don't want to be some absent father they barely know. And I don't want you to go through this alone." She met his eyes, and for the first time since she had discovered her pregnancy, Evelyn didn't feel alone anymore. News of Evelyn Carter and Theo Sterling spread like wildfire, but not in the way they had hoped. "A rising AI genius or a calculated opportunist," one headline read. Evelyn Carter, the woman who stole Theo Sterling's heart and maybe his fortune? Evelyn's stomach twisted as she read those words. She had never wanted to be in the public eye, and now they were painting her as some kind of gold digger. But that was only the beginning. A few days later, Richard Hale, Theo's most ruthless competitor, released an old video, a recording from 8 years ago, when Theo was still an ambitious young businessman trying to make his mark. "This company is weak. We buy it, strip it for parts, and use whatever's left. Don't let emotions get in the way." The words were sharp, clinical, and intentionally edited. The media pounced on it, crafting a narrative of a cold-hearted CEO who would destroy anyone in his path. "Has he really changed, or is this just another power play?" a news anchor questioned. Evelyn glanced at Theo as he muted the TV, his jaw tight with tension. She knew those words weren't the full picture of the man he was, but would the world believe that? And then things got worse. A sudden internal investigation was launched at Evelyn's research center. Confidential AI medical documents, unpublished data from her studies, were allegedly leaked to Sterling Dynamics. She was summoned to a meeting, and though there was no concrete proof, the fact that she was carrying Theo's children made people suspicious. "Do you have a personal interest in sharing information with Mr. Sterling, Dr. Carter?" a board member questioned her. The accusation hit her like a slap. Everything she had built, her entire career, was now being threatened, not because of her work, but because of who she had chosen to love. But Evelyn wasn't someone who backed down. She met the board member's gaze, her voice unwavering. "This research is mine. I built it from the ground up, and I will defend it with everything I have." At the same time, Theo made a bold decision. He called for a press conference, not to deny his past, but to face it head-on. Standing before a room packed with reporters, he spoke candidly about his past mistakes. "I was once a man who only cared about winning, but people can change. I have changed." He didn't make excuses. He didn't deflect blame. Instead, he met the cameras directly. Evelyn Carter is not an opportunist. She is one of the most brilliant minds of our time. If anyone is exploiting this situation, it's the people trying to tear her down. His words ignited a storm in the media, but this time, it wasn't just another scandal. It was a battle for truth. Evelyn sat in her office watching the press conference on her screen. When Theo finished speaking, their eyes met through the broadcast. And she knew she wasn't fighting alone. The days following the press conference felt like a whirlwind. The media storm had yet to settle, and the world still had plenty to say about them. But within the quiet walls of Evelyn's apartment, there were no reporters, no accusations, just the two of them, standing together after everything they had been through. Theo had meant every word he said. He devoted every free moment to Evelyn, taking her to every prenatal checkup, listening intently to the rhythmic thump-thump of their babies' hearts. He spent hours picking out colors for the nursery, assembling cribs, carefully placing tiny stuffed animals on the shelves, transforming their once quiet apartment into a home filled with anticipation and love. For the first time in years, his world wasn't about billion-dollar deals or strategic acquisitions. It was about late-night conversations, feeling the gentle movements of their unborn children, and watching Evelyn as she dreamed of their future. But life had a way of reminding them that not everything could be planned. That night, the rain pounded against the streets of San Francisco, thunder rumbling overhead. Evelyn was home alone when the first sharp contraction hit. At first, she brushed it off as Braxton Hicks, but when the pain came again, closer, stronger, undeniable, she knew she couldn't wait. Her hands trembled as she dialed Theo's number. "Evelyn?" His voice was deep, instantly alert. "Theo, it's time!" she gasped, gripping the edge of the counter as another wave of pain rolled through her. She heard the scrape of a chair, the rush of movement. "Stay where you are, I'm coming." And then the line went dead. Outside, the storm raged on, but Theo didn't hesitate. He dropped everything, bolted into the night, and ran through the downpour. His only thought was getting to her. By the time he reached the hospital, he was drenched, but none of it mattered. Evelyn was already in labor. And just a few hours later, their twins entered the world, two tiny beings with immeasurable strength, binding them together in a way nothing else ever could. In the dimly lit hospital room, Theo cradled his newborn son, gazing down at the small, perfect face. The boy had his dark hair, but Evelyn's gentleness in his features. He looked up at her, his voice raw with emotion. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for giving me a family." And in that moment, Theo knew. No deal, no empire, nothing in the world could compare to this. Time passed, and Theo made a decision that shocked many. He stepped down as CEO of Sterling Dynamics, handing over control to his trusted executive team. He didn't want to miss a single moment with his children. Evelyn, on the other hand, continued her research, pursuing the work she loved. But this time, she wasn't alone. No matter how far she went, she always had someone to come home to. 2 years passed in quiet happiness. Afternoons spent napping on the couch with the twins curled up in his arms. Evenings filled with laughter, walks beneath the golden sunset. Moments he had never imagined for himself, but now couldn't live without. And then, one spring evening, Theo did what he should have done long ago. Evelyn had just returned home from a long day at the lab, tired but pleased with the progress in her latest research. As she stepped into the backyard, she froze. Theo was there, kneeling in the middle of glowing lights, their 2 children standing beside him, their tiny hands clutching at his suit. He didn't speak at first, just looked at her with an intensity that held every unspoken word. "Evelyn Carter," he said, his voice steady, "you changed my life in ways I never thought possible. You gave me a home, a family, a place to belong, and now I want to spend the rest of my life proving that I belong by your side. Marry me." Their toddlers clapped excitedly, not quite understanding the moment. But for Evelyn, this was everything. She looked at the man before her, the one who had once been consumed by power and ambition but had chosen a different path. For her. For them. "Yes, Theo," she whispered, tears shimmering in her eyes. "I'll marry you." One day, when someone asked them if it had all been worth it, the struggles, the sacrifices, the battles they had fought to hold on to this love, the answer would always be yes. Because in the end, love, change, and courage had helped them overcome everything. And as the golden light of the evening filtered through the windows of their home, a family sat together, whole, complete, and missing nothing.